is Jenny Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we have UALR law professor Robert Steinbuch joining us today. Of course, every time that Professor Steinbuch joins us, his views are his own and not those represented of the law school. Hi, Professor. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jenny. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Listen, I saw recently that the ADL came to your defense recently regarding the law school there not accommodating you regarding your religious beliefs and observations. We spoke to you, Conduit spoke to you about this a few weeks ago. Catch us up on where this is.
Sure. Thank you for asking. Of course, to remind your viewers, I am Jewish and I take off 3 days a year, at most, by the way, for Jewish holidays, because the religion requires that one not work on those days. It's very much like the Sabbath. As you know, we share the notion that one does not work on the Sabbath, and we don't work on the holy days. And of course, Christians typically don't work on the holy days, and those are days generally given off. And that's great. I think that's wonderful. No one would expect that we would come to work on Christmas, for example, upcoming. But the Jewish holidays are not generally days off because we're a relatively small percentage of the population. And so we ask simply for a reasonable accommodation. And indeed, the law requires exactly that. Indeed, frankly, by the way, the biggest friends of Jews who observe their religion are evangelical Christians. They are the most in support of that observation. So, as you might recall, I had taken off 2 days for the Jewish New Year and then the Jewish Day of Atonement, the latter of which requires a 25-hour fast, no drinking, no eating, and neither allows for working on those days. During those days, I had a federal judge cover my class, and he talked about issues that, of course, are relevant to that class, being, after all, a federal judge. And the dean inquired out of the blue, oh, why were you off? I would have preferred had she sort of deduced that it was for the Jewish holidays, but so be it. We can all make mistakes. And I said, she thought perhaps I was ill. And I said, no, I was off for the Jewish holidays. And notwithstanding having worked here for almost 20 years, she said, oh, you have to fill out a form. And so there's never a bureaucratic process that goes missed, it seems to me, when working for a government entity. And so I filled out the form and I said, I'd like to do what I've done for the last nearly 20 years. And first among them is have a guest lecturer cover my class. Other options, of course, include making up the class through extra minutes, etc. And the dean said, you can't have a guest lecturer. I won't allow that. Again, notwithstanding that I've done so for the last 20 years. Well, as it turns out, my colleague reminded me that same day, oh, we have a rule on that. And the rule says, if you're out of class and it's impracticable for you as a professor to show up for class, then you can have, amongst other things, guess what? A guest lecturer. So it all fit neatly together like a puzzle. And I presented this, of course, to the dean as well. And she persists in her view that she will not permit me to have a guest lecturer during my class. Now, to be clear, one of her objections is that she thinks it's better if I make up the class. And my response to that is, of course, well, you're entitled to that view, right? We're all entitled to our view. The question is what the rules permit. And and of course, professors have academic freedom, and which means we get to make reasonable decisions about what we do in our classes. And we have a specific rule that permits us. So now fast forward, and I filed a complaint with the school. I went through one level of administrative review and so far have not been given a solution. And so I'm now at the next level of administrative review. I had a letter by a group that contacted me, the Jewish Lawyers Association, something along those lines. I apologize, I can't remember exactly the name of the group, Lawyers and Jurists, I believe. And they wrote the school and said, it appears that what the school is doing is wrong. It's both violative of the school's rules and violative of the law. Because remember, in the law, if an entity gives a benefit to any group, they have to give at least as good a benefit to groups that are exercising religious rights, because we have the First Amendment. And the First Amendment not only allows speech, it allows religion. And the school has routinely allowed people to take off for medical reasons, for example, and use a guest lecturer. Indeed, I was a guest lecturer for colleagues of mine when they took off for medical reasons. So if you allow for medical reasons, irrespective of the internal rule, federal law requires, including the Constitution, by the way, requires that you must allow it for religious observance as well. And this lawyers group wrote a letter to the dean. That did not affect her, seemingly. Most recently, and finally to the point that you raised, and I'm sorry to have taken so long to get there, the Anti-Defamation League, which is a bit of a misnomer, it is the oldest and most prominent group that fights anti-Semitism. It's known throughout the world for fighting anti-Semitism. They too contacted me. They read about it in the newspaper, and they asked me what happened, and I described to them and sent them the materials. And they wrote a letter to the dean now a week plus ago, expressing the same notion, that it appears that the school is violating both their internal rules as well as the law. And so far, there's been no response from the dean.
It seems as though with all of these steps that have happened, with there being history of, you doing this, it's in, instead, the law school, rather than saying, you know what, we're so sorry, professor, you know what, we were wrong. And, please forgive us, that sort of thing, move forward. But instead, it's like, no, we're going to double down on this. What do you think about that?
Well, it brings up, of course, the old maxim, when in a hole, stop digging. And I don't understand this behavior. If I make a mistake and it's pointed out to me, or I realize it, I correct it and I apologize and we move on. But the school has taken the opposite approach, and it's really problematic. In fact, the chair of the Senate State Agencies Committee, that's Senator Jason Raper, was quoted in a newspaper article this weekend on this issue. And he said that the behavior of the school is to be fair, the behavior of the dean is tarnishing the image of this school. And the school is a collective. I'm the school, the other faculty of the school, students are the school, the administration is the school. So everybody constitutes the school. But this one activity is tarnishing the image of the school, and it's really problematic. The senator rather called on the administration of the school, as well as the University of Arkansas president, to right this wrong. I have done so as well, and I do so again. You might recall that only a few months ago, the dean decided that one of our named professorships, you might know that as a chair, sometimes you hear about a named chair, similar, essentially the same. And it was called something like the public policy chair, the words to that effect. Wasn't important. And they decided to name it after Bill Clinton. What? Right. This chair has existed for 20 years. And now all of a sudden it's going to be named after Bill Clinton. Now, remember, of course, administrations across this country of law schools are generally leftists. And I have no doubt that my school is similarly so, and that they're strong supporters of Bill Clinton. I'm not a huge fan. By the way, I've said on more than one occasion, he was not a terrible president, as odd as that might sound. And I say it because he made an effort to balance the budget, and that's a conservative ideal, and you give credit where credit is due. But what you don't do is name a position at a law school after a guy who was kicked out of practicing before the Supreme Court, and I believe also gave up his bar license in the state. And so it's really sort of telling that you would want to name a person with that specific profile at a law school. The dean indeed mocked me, and she said, you have offered in the past to teach an adjunct class at the Clinton School. Maybe I did. I don't recall, frankly, but that's fine. Well, why would you do that? Seemingly, the claim is that because I object to naming a position at a law school after a lawyer who lost his privileges, that therefore I couldn't walk into any building named after Clinton. I guess I couldn't fly out of the Clinton airport either, right? I mean, it shows sort of the pettiness of what's going on.
With everything that's happened, does this feel as though you're being harassed or being targeted? It seems personal in some way.
Yeah, well, the Senator Rapert, the chair of the State Agencies Committee, used those terms in the Mike Masterson article this past weekend. And indeed, I remind you that when I raised the issue after a colleague did about the Clinton affair, or I seconded, to be fair, I didn't raise it. I wish I did, but my colleague was the one who picked up on it before me. And the dean wrote to the two of us privately, said, nobody else cares about this. None of your colleagues care about this. And had said all along that she was fully authorized to name the professorship after Bill Clinton. Fast forward a few weeks, maybe a month, and the chancellor of UA Little Rock, wrote a letter to Senator Rapert, Chairman Rapert, and said, no, that was a mistake. We are undoing it entirely. So we were correct. And whether or not our colleagues care about it, the law cares about it. It wasn't correct to do.
Well, that brings me to a point that you mentioned earlier, where the dean stated, no, you can't have a guest lecturer come in, and you said, well, that may be your opinion or your view. That's not what it states. And we are seeing that all across our country right now. It is, well, I want to impose my views. I want to impose what I believe on you. And I mean, it just seems like this massive epidemic right now.
It's even worse than that, as bad as that is. There's one, the left wants to impose their views on everyone because they're always right. It's this notion, and there is some overlap, by the way, with those who move away from sort of traditional values and traditional notions and our view of ourselves in the world under God. And when you start to think of yourself as supreme in every way, well, then you start to view yourself as not being able to do any wrong. Of course, the Soviets were well known for that. The Soviet leadership was well known for that. And so that's one of the problems that we're seeing across this country. And you're 100% correct, Jenny. But then there's another phenomenon related there too, which is they take the English language and they don't distort it. They don't pervert it. They ignore it entirely, right? So we have a rule here that says if it's impracticable to show up to class, the professor can have a guest lecturer. And you know what they say? It doesn't say that. What? I just read you the words. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that. It doesn't say that. So instead of actually engaging with what we teach students, argumentation based on the words, based on facts, based on reality, it's just blanket denials. That's not what it says. Of course, the Biden administration has gotten into hot water with this, with their imposition of mandates regarding vaccination. And they said, we're entitled to do that. And people said, pursuant to what? Right? Remember, the federal government only has those powers that are granted to it. Pursuant to what? Oh, well, there's some OSHA statute. Really? An OSHA statute? You think entitles you to do that? And of course, the courts, for the most part, have said, doesn't say that at all. So it's this complete abuse of the English language, coupled with this desire to impose their will on everyone, irrespective of freedom and irrespective of law.
Where does this go? So you mentioned that you filed the written complaint. You, I believe, will soon go before a board of your peers there. If you don't have a favorable outcome, then, what's next?
In fact, I've gone before the board of peers. I'm waiting to hear back from them already. Meaning, I'm not saying they're late. That the next step is to hear back from them. And then thereafter, if I lose, then I go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that is the prelude to federal litigation.
Shifting gears a little bit, the last time that we spoke, that you were on Conduit, we talked about your recent op-ed in the dim gas about Little Rock and the crime surge. We have since seen the Little Rock police chief and the mayor come out in most recent days talking about it. Give me your overall impression.
Well, my first impression, Ginny, is something I already knew, but I'll share with your listeners. Conduit has a big reach. It is no accident that both the chief and the mayor, King Scott, as I like to call him, have come out to talk about the issue of safety and security in Little Rock immediately after I was on your show talking about these issues. Fair credit also to the Dem Gaz for publishing the letter that I wrote. But these are important issues. As I said in that letter, indeed, the most important issue for a mayor, for a local leader, is the safety and security of his or her citizens, and they have failed in that. They have failed entirely. This city has some of the most dangerous actions going on. The statistics are the worst they've been in 30 years. Can you imagine? 30 years. And we're living in this city. And so the chief came out and made certain statements about wanting to track people after they get out of jail. I'm not sure it's legal to do that. And then the mayor put out sort of a call for proposals. Here's a proposal, Mayor. I got two for you. One, three. You see, they just keep coming up. It's like bubbles in a boiling pot. One is allow the cops to do their job.
Right.
Two is stop pandering to the left and understand what your job is. Instead of trying to get more zebras at the zoo, put more cops on the beat.
Giraffe? I think giraffes, right?
I'm sure you're right. And let's focus on what's really important. And finally, you know what, Mr. Mayor, maybe it's time for you to move on. Those are my three suggestions.
Yeah, well, do you feel like now that they're coming out, talking about this, of course, the mayor's race is heating up there with Steve Landers. Do you feel as though now they're trying to play catch up and just do a few things to make it seem like they're, putting forth effort and they want to, right the wrong?
Of course, indeed, that must be the case. I don't even know if this mayor is going to run for re-election. I think he's going to have an awful time if he does. Mm-hmm. So maybe I want him to run for re-election because he'll be easier to beat than maybe someone else who would have a bad agenda, but we wouldn't really know about it. We've seen this mayor's performance, and it's absolutely awful. So I look forward to new leadership in Little Rock.
I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. Well, listen, keep us posted on what happens with the dean there at the law school. If any other issues come up, please let us know. We always really enjoy having you on Conduit, Professor.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to talking with you again soon.